Disturbing the Peace by Richard Yates. For Monica McCall. Chapter 1. Everything began to go wrong for James Wilder in the late summer of 1960. And the worst part, she always said afterwards, the awful part, was that it seemed to happen without warning. She was 34 and the mother of a 10-year-old son. The fading of her youth didn't bother her, and it hadn't been a very carefree or adventurous youth anyway. And if her marriage was more an arrangement than a romance, that was all right too. Nobody's life was perfect. She enjoyed the orderly rotation of her days. She enjoyed books, of which she owned a great many. And she enjoyed her high, bright apartment with its view of Midtown Manhattan towers. It was neither a rich nor an elegant apartment, but it was comfortable. And comfortable was one of Janice Wilder's favorite words. She was fond of the word civilized, too, and of reasonable and adjustment and relationship. Hardly anything upset or frightened her. The only things that did, sometimes to the point of making her blood run cold, were things she didn't understand. "I don't understand," she said to her husband on the telephone. "What do you mean you can't come home?" And she glanced uneasily at their boy, who sat on the carpet eating an apple and absorbed in the CBS evening news. "What?" she said. "I can't hear you. You're what? Wait, I'll take this in the bedroom." When she was alone at the extension phone behind two closed doors, she said, "All right, John, let's start at the beginning. Where are you? At LaGuardia?" "No, thank God. I finally got out of that son of a bitch. Must have spent at least 2 hours walking around and around out there before I figured out how to get a cab. Then I got one of these damn talky cab drivers and he..." "You're drunk, aren't you?" "Will you let me finish?" "No, I'm not drunk. I've been drinking, but I'm not drunk. Listen, you know how much sleep I got in Chicago? The whole week? Almost none. 1, 2 hours a night, and last night I didn't sleep at all. You don't believe me, do you? You never believe the truth. Just tell me where you're calling from." "I don't know, some kind of stand-up phone booth, and my legs are about to..." "Grand Central. The Biltmore. No, wait, the Commodore. I'm having a drink at the Commodore." "Well, dear, that's practically around the corner. All you have to do is..." "God damn it, are you listening? I just got through telling you I can't come home." She hunched forward on the edge of the double bed with her elbows on her slacks, holding the phone tightly in both hands. "Why?" she said. "Jesus, hundreds of reasons. More reasons than I could possibly begin to enumerate. One thing, I forgot to get a present for Tommy." "Oh, John, that's absurd. He's 10 now. He doesn't expect a present every time he..." "Okay, here's another thing. There was a girl in Chicago, little PR girl for one of the distilleries. I screwed her 5 times in the Palmer House. What do you think of that?" It wasn't the first news of its kind. There had been a good many girls, but it was the first time he'd ever flung it at her this way, like an adolescent braggart trying to shock his mother. She thought of saying, "What would you like me to think?" but didn't trust her voice. It might sound wounded, which would be a mistake, or it might sound dry and tolerant, and that would be worse. Luckily, he didn't wait long for an answer. "And what do you think of this?" All the way back on the plane, I kept looking at my sweet little air transportation credit card. Know what I could do with that card anytime I feel like it? I could say the hell with everything. Climb into a big silver bird and take off to some place like Rio. Lie around in the sun and drink and do absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing until... John, I'm not listening to any more of this. Tell me why you can't come home." "You really want to know, sweetheart? Because I'm afraid I might kill you. That's why. Both of you." Paul Borg, like the Wilders' son, was watching the CBS News. He said, "Damn," when the phone rang because Eric Seberide had just reached a summing up about Senator Kennedy's chances of defeating Vice President Nixon. "I'll get it," his wife called from the steaming kitchen. No, that's all right. I'll get it." His legal clients sometimes called him at home and they wanted to hear his voice right away with no fooling around. But this was no client. "Oh," he said. "Hi, Janice. Paul, I hate to bother you at dinner time, but I'm terribly concerned about John." He listened, interrupting her with questions, and the questions were enough to bring his own wife slowly out of the kitchen, enough to make her turn off the television set and stand as close as possible beside him at the phone, her eyes round with fascination. When he said, "Afraid he might kill you?" her cheeks turned pink and the fingers of one unsteady hand crept into her mouth. "Well, of course I'll do whatever I can, Janice. I'll run up there now and, have a talk with him. Try to find out what the problem is. You just take it easy and don't worry, okay? I'll get back to you as soon as I can." "Okay, Janice." "My God," his wife said when he'd hung up. "Where's my tie?" She found it and pulled his coat from the hall closet with such urgency that the wire hanger clattered to the floor. Did he really threaten to kill her? She looked radiant. "Oh, for God's sake, Natalie." "No, of course he didn't threaten. Apparently he's just going through some kind of nervous or emotional. I'll tell you when I get back." He let the door slam behind him, but she opened it and followed him halfway to the elevator. "Paul, what about dinner?" "You go ahead and eat. I'll get something uptown. And listen, I don't want you calling Janice. I want her phone to be free so I can call her, okay?" They lived in one of the new tall buildings of the Northwest Village. Borg figured it would take him no more than 10 minutes to get to the Commodore, and as he eased out of his parking space and headed uptown on Hudson, he was pleased with the efficiency of his car and the fluid skill of his driving. He was pleased, too, at the way Janice's voice had gone from desperation to a renewal of strength and hope. Pleased that she'd called him in the first place. Once at a crosstown stoplight, he leaned over for a quick look in the rearview mirror to make sure his hair and tie were straight and to admire the sober maturity of his face. Not until a horn blared behind him did he see the light was green. He spotted his man as soon as he walked into the downstairs bar. John Wilder sat alone at a table against the far wall, staring into a drink with his forehead resting on his hand. But it was important to make this seem a chance encounter, which shouldn't be hard. They both worked in offices not far away. They'd often met here for a drink on their way home. To dispel any notion of conspiracy, he slid one buttock onto a bar stool and ordered a scotch and soda. Make it light. And silently counted to 100 before he risked another glance at Wilder. No change. His hair had been raked awry by nervous fingers. That alone was odd because he was usually careful to the point of vanity about his hair. And with his face in shadow, it was impossible to guess at whether he was drunk or exhausted or, well, whatever. From the head down, though, he was the same as ever. A short, composed, well-proportioned man in a well-cut business suit, fresh shirt and dark tie, with an expensive suitcase on the floor beside his knee. Borg turned back to the bar, hoping Wilder might see him first. Then he counted to 100 again, carried his drink across the room in what he hoped was a casual stroll, and said, "Hey, John, thought you were in Chicago." Wilder looked up, and he looked terrible. Very pale, beaded with sweat, and his eyes seemed out of focus. "Just get back?" Borg said, pulling out a chair to sit down with him. "While ago. What are you doing out so late?" At least he seemed to know what time it was. "Didn't get out of the office till 7. Hell of a day. Meetings, phone calls. Sometimes everything happens at once, you know." But Wilder wasn't listening. He finished his drink greedily and said, "How old are you now, Paul? 40? Almost 41. Son of a bitch, I'm not even 36 and I feel old as God. Waiter! Where the hell's that waiter?" When his eyes turned back, they were clear and keen. "Tell me something else. Why do you suppose we both married homely women?" Borg felt a welling of blood from his collar to his scalp. "Come on," he said. You know that's a stupid thing to say. True, though. Hell, it's understandable in my case because I've always been a shrimp. Everybody said I looked like Mickey Rooney when I was a kid, and I mean it's no cinch to get good-looking girls with a handicap like that. I guess I settled on Janice because she had these wonderful big tits when she was younger. Figured I could forget the rest of it. The short legs and the full back shoulders and the face. I just bury myself in those tits forever and shut out the world. Jesus. But that's my story. What's yours? I mean, you're tall. How come you wound up with an alligator like Natalie? All right, cut it out now, John. You've had too much to drink. Hell, I have. How do you know how much I've had to drink? Need sleep, is all. Absolutely no sleep the whole week in Chicago. Thrashed around in that bed at the Palmer house with my nerves screaming and my mind going in circles like some crazy, I don't know. Had a nice little girl thrashing around with me part of the time, and even that didn't help. But you know something? I learned a lot about myself. Sometimes when you can't sleep, you figure things out. I did anyway. Hell of a lot of things. And coming in from the airport, I got one of these damn talky cab drivers, and you know what he said? He said, "Oh, Jesus, you're sore at me now, aren't you, Paul? You're sore because I called Natalie an alligator." I'm not sore. I'm concerned about you. You don't look well, and you're not talking sensibly. Frankly, I don't think you're in any shape to go home tonight. And Wilder gave a heavy sigh of relief. Neither do I, old friend. No shape at all. Tried to tell Janice that, and she didn't understand. Listen, you call her, okay? You explain it. Sure, John, I'll call her later. Because, I mean, she'll understand anything if you explain it. She thinks you're Abraham fucking Lincoln. All right, John. You're a lucky bastard, you know that, Paul? I mean, a lawyer's a professional, man. Like a doctor or a priest. People listen when you talk. You're not some turd under everybody's feet like me. Cab drivers, waiters, all my life I've been victimized by slobs. Tyrannized by slobs. What did that cab driver say, John? That smartass. He was driving like a maniac, and I kept telling him to slow down, you see, and I was kind of jumping and squirming around in the back seat, and he said, "You better see a psychiatrist, buddy. You're a nervous wreck." Another thing, you're lucky you don't have any kids. My God, if it weren't for Tommy, I'd take my sweet little air transportation credit card, climb into a big silver bird, and take off to someplace like Rio. Lie around in the sun till my money's gone and then blow my brains out. I mean it. No, you don't. Let's try to be reasonable, John. Nobody can go without sleep for a week. I think you need medical care. You need sedation and rest. Let me run you down to St. Vincent's. Listen, Borg, you're a nice guy and you've had a hard day at the office, and I'm sorry I called your wife an alligator. Because she's nice too, and she's probably got a dandy little chicken noodle casserole waiting for you downtown. But I'll be a son of a bitch if you're going to lock me up in any hospital. Nobody's going to lock you up. You'll check into St. Vincent's for exhaustion. They'll put you to sleep, and you'll come out tomorrow or the next day like a new man, like your old self. It's the only thing to do. There was a pause. Let me think about it. And thinking about it meant calling for another drink, half of which he finished in a swallow. I got a better idea, he said. Then, take me down to Varick Street. And Borg winced because he'd been afraid of that suggestion from the start. Several years ago, the two of them had joined in renting a dirt-cheap basement apartment on Varick Street. A cellar apartment, really, the kind supposed to be condemned by the city, as a secret retreat from their married lives. They'd had it cleaned up and painted white. They'd equipped it with a double bed and a well-stocked liquor cabinet, a second-hand stove and a refrigerator, and enough other stuff to make it nice. And an unlisted phone. The idea was that when either of them came across what Wilder called a windfall, an available willing girl, he could disappear into the place for an afternoon or even a couple of nights. feigning out-of-town business and be a happy if somewhat nervous bachelor again. But it had sounded better than it was. There'd never really been all that many windfalls. You don't want to go to Varick Street, John. Who says I don't? What's the matter? You going there yourself? No, I haven't been down there for months. But if the girl in Chicago couldn't help you sleep, what makes you think some other girl could? Might be worth a try. You ever met Rita? Research girl up at Time in Life. Of course, it's probably too late to call her. Or the sort of heavy one. What's her name? Married to the doctor? No, wait, she moved to Boston. Come on, John, let's be realistic. And Wilder gave up. Realistic, right. That's my trouble. All my life I've never been realistic. I ever tell you how I wanted to make movies? Jesus Christ. He finished his drink. Okay, Borg, you're on. One more drink and I'll be realistic as hell. Waiter? He thrust his glass as far into the aisle as his arm would allow, and might have fallen out of the chair if he hadn't clung to the table with his free hand. No need to shout, sir, the waiter said. No need to be a little wise guy either. Look, mister, I don't have to serve you. Yeah? Well, then how'd you like to kiss my ass, greaseball? It's all right, Borg said, laying many dollar bills on the table. It's all right. We're leaving. Here, John, I'll take your suitcase. What do you mean? I can't carry my own bag? You think I'm a cripple? But the bag did give him trouble. He got it wedged in one of the plate glass doors and said, "Son of a bitch," causing people to turn and look at him. Then as they walked the passageway to Lexington Avenue, he stopped and put it down several times, once nearly tripping a woman because he said it was killing his hand and breaking the hell out of his leg. He was quiet in the car as Borg crept through crosstown traffic, but when they begun the long ride down 7th Avenue, he began to twist and writhe against the passenger's door, and one hand flew up as if to shield his face. Christ's sake, Paul, will you watch your driving? Will you slow down? Try to take it easy, John. I'm going as slow as I can. It was a busy evening at the St. Vincent's emergency entrance. Stretchers on the floor with orderlies or interns crouched over them. A middle-aged woman bleeding from the face and groaning on an examination table. But Borg found a partitioned alcove where a young man in white sat behind a desk, apparently in charge. Doctor, this isn't really an emergency, but my friend here is exhausted. He hasn't had any sleep for a week and he needs sedation. Frankly, I think he may be going through some sort of nervous or... Borg could not afterwards remember how he'd finished that sentence. He was aware only of the doctor's eyes blinking through thick glasses at one and then the other of them. Wilder had opened his collar and tie long ago. Now he clawed them open further and so roughly that a shirt button fell and spun on the floor. When the doctor told him to sit down, he dropped his suitcase with a crash and sank into the only seat available. A big old-fashioned wheelchair of varnished yellow wood that made him look very small and helpless, especially when it rolled backwards and was caught by an orderly who had appeared from nowhere. Would you please step outside, sir? The doctor said, and Borg was quick to obey. His feet hurt. He was hungry and tired and wanted to go home. All this would be over soon. Oh, I don't know how to thank you, Paul, Janice would say. I can't imagine what we'd ever have done without you. The partition was thin. He couldn't hear the words of the doctor's interrogation or Wilder's replies, but he assumed it was a routine interview for admission. Name and age and occupation, next of kin, medical history, previous instances of insomnia, and then it all went out of control. You're goddamned right I've been drinking. What the hell do you do when you can't sleep, sonny boy? Eat fudge? Watch The Late Show? Pull your prick? Listen, you overeducated little snot-nose, you faggoty little... Listen, I figured out a lot of things about myself this week. Things you'd never understand in 100 years. By the time Borg was back in the alcove, there was a sound of splintering wood as Wilder stamped one shoe on the footrest of the wheelchair and broke it. And the orderly said, "Easy, mister, easy." The doctor had stood up from his scattered paperwork, and Wilder was saying, "I've been a turd under everybody's feet all my life, and I've just now figured out there's greatness in me. There's greatness in me, and if you don't quit looking at me that way, if you don't let me into this fucking hospital, I'm going to take your glasses and shove them down your fucking throat. Is that clear?" Then the orderly had turned him around and wheeled him down a hall, and the doctor was explaining to Borg that there were no facilities for him here. That in his judgment, the only course was to take him to Bellevue, and that an ambulance would be provided at once. "I'll call ahead now," he said. "They'll be ready for you." And the next thing Borg knew, he was cramped on a narrow bench of the ambulance with the suitcase between his legs. He had always thought that stretcher patients were carried face up, but Wilder lay on his belly with the hands of 3 or 4 attendants holding him down, and he was still shouting in a monologue so nearly incoherent that only the words "fuck" and "shit" and "greatness" came through. In the dim pink and gray light, Borg could see that his coat and shirt were rucked up to his shoulder blades. He pulled them down and rubbed the damp, trembling spine in what he hoped would feel like reassurance. "John," he said, whether Wilder could hear him or not, "you wanted a good rest and you're going to get it. Just relax now. You're all right." That was when the ambulance gained speed and its siren came on, growling low at first and rising to a scream as they swerved across town. "Ow!" Wilder said over and over, as if the smooth ride were filled with bruising bumps and potholes. "Ow! Ow! Ow!" And Bellevue, or whatever part of the labyrinth of Bellevue they arrived at, was so bewildering that Borg's own mind went briefly out of focus. He stood around with his mouth open like a fool's, holding Wilder's suitcase until someone handed him a printed form headed City of New York, Department of Hospitals, showed him where to sign his name, where to put his home and office phone numbers, and told him to write "friend" in the space marked "relationship." He did that quickly because they wouldn't let him see Wilder until it was done. Then he found he couldn't see him anyway because Wilder's arms were slung tight around the necks of 2 big orderlies, who dragged him still shouting toward a closed elevator, where a 3rd orderly waited with a wheelchair, and they not only forced him into it but strapped him in. When the elevator door slid open, they shoved him inside, and across the back of the chair was the stenciled word "psycho." "Look," Borg said to the nearest white-coated man he could find. "Listen, what's the procedure here?" The man smiled, shrugged, and spoke rapidly in what could have been either Spanish or Italian. "Are you a doctor?" "Me? No. Doctor over there." "This your bag, mister?" Another voice said. "No. I mean, yes. Wait. Here, I'll take it." Then he said, "Doctor, excuse me, but I'm a little... What exactly is the procedure here?" This man was very young, too, like the one at St. Vincent's, but handsome enough to play the romantic lead in some movie about a great metropolitan hospital. "The procedure? Thanks, honey," he said to a nurse or a nurse's aide, who had brought him a hamburger and a container of coffee. "You're very welcome." "What I mean is," Borg said, "could you tell me what they're going to do with Mr. Wilder?" "Wilder." He set his coffee down, picked up a clipboard, and squinted at it. "Oh, yes, you're the man who signed him in, right? Mr. Berg?" "Borg. I'm an attorney." And he pulled his coat straight as further proof of respectability. The warm brown smell of the hamburger was making him weak with hunger. "Well, he'll be treated like any other patient, Mr. Borg," the doctor said with his mouth full. "They'll put him to sleep, first of all." "And how soon do you think he might be released?" "Hard to say. This is Friday night, and it's the Labor Day weekend. The psychiatrist won't be back till Tuesday, and it'll probably be Wednesday or Thursday before they can review his case. After that, it's entirely up to them." "My God, I'd forgotten about Labor Day. The point is I'd never have signed that paper if I'd realized. I mean, this is really very unfortunate." "I wouldn't worry about it," the doctor said around his chewing, spilling crumbs of meat and bread from his lips. I'd say you've done the right thing. Look, you're an attorney. You deal with the police at all? No, my clients are. No, I don't deal with the police. Well, okay. Even so, you've seen the shape he's in. He wiped his mouth on one white sleeve and left a streak of ketchup. Which is better, having him safe in here for a while or out walking the streets until the cops pick him up and book him for disturbing the peace? Chapter 2. He woke up soaked with sweat, breathing stale and fetid air. A naked light bulb shone in his eyes, and he found he was in a steel-framed bunk slung by chains from the wall, like a bunk in a troop ship or a jail. "Everybody out," a voice called, and there were other sounds. Groans and curses, wretched coughing and hawking, a loud fart, the creak and bang of bunks being folded back and clamped against the wall. Let's go, everybody out." When he sat up, a hand closed around his shoulder and rolled him onto the floor. He was wearing gray cotton pajamas that were much too big for him. The pants tripped his stumbling bare feet, and the sleeves hung to his fingertips. Swaying and squinting under the lights, he rolled up the sleeves first, disclosing a loose plastic bracelet that read Wilder, John C. He bent over to roll up the pants, but was kicked from behind and fell to his hands, and he looked up frightened into the angry face of a Negro in pajamas like his own. "Watch your ass, man. This here's the corridor. You got no business hunkering down playing with yourself. Get up and walk." And he did. Steel mesh panels were being drawn around the folded bunks to prevent anyone from using them. This was indeed the corridor, the place for walking. It was yellow and green and brown and black. It was neither very long nor very wide, but it was immensely crowded with men of all ages, from adolescence to senility, whites and Negroes and Puerto Ricans, half of them walking one way and half in the other, the dismaying variety of their faces moving into the glare of lights, and then into shadows, and then into the lights again. Some were talking to one another, and some talked to themselves, but most were silent. He felt warm grit under his feet until he stepped on something slick. Then he saw the black floor ahead was scattered with gobs of phlegm. A few of the walking men wore dirty paper slippers, and he envied them. A few were smoking, with packs of cigarettes in their pajama top pockets, which puckered the roof of his mouth. Then he saw that some weren't wearing pajama tops but straitjackets, and he wanted to whimper like a child. There were closed windows at both ends of the corridor, covered with steel mesh. The light outside was drab, either an early gray morning or a late gray afternoon, and there was nothing to see but air shafts and windowless walls. Near the middle of the corridor stood a Negro orderly in hospital greens, and he hurried toward him with a mouthful of questions. "Look, where's my clothes? Where's my money? Where's a phone? What's the deal here?" And when confronted the man, he felt small and shy, and all he knew was that his bladder was about to burst. "Excuse me," he said, "where's the bathroom?" "Over there." And he followed the pointed finger into a bright, stinking latrine where men squatted on toilet bowls or stood jockeying for position at a long urinal trough. "Now this here," another orderly explained, "is your toothbrush. Way you can always tell is because it got your name on it. See that tape? Wilder. When you're done with it, put it back here in this rack. Ain't nobody gonna use this toothbrush but you, and you're never gonna use nobody else's toothbrush. Understand? That way, nobody pick up no trench mouth or nothing like that. Understand?" But nobody was allowed his own razor. The men stood 4 and 5 deep, waiting to shave at a steamed-up mirror under watchful official eyes. "Soon's he's done, you rinse the razor and lay it on the shelf. Ain't no use fooling with that razor. You can't get that blade out. That razor's locked. Showers for the new men only. Showers for the new men only. Not you, Gonzalez. You come on back out of there." There was no soap in the communal shower room and no way of regulating the water. The new men slid around on greasy duck boards and tried to clean themselves until each was given a towel in one hand and his own wadded pajamas in the other. "Can I have slippers?" "Ain't no more slippers. Slippers are all gone." And then it was back to the corridor with nothing to do but walk. He passed a locked door with a small wired glass window and peered inside to discover a padded cell. Canvas mats of the kind used by wrestlers and gymnasts were hung from the walls and spread on the floor. It was vacant, but the one next door was occupied. A man in a straitjacket lay face down in it, as still as death, with a dark stain of piss around his thighs. "I don't care! I don't care!" Both columns of walkers shrank aside to make way for the spectacle of a young white man in shadowboxing down the middle of the hall. He was stripped to the waist, and he'd neatly ripped off his pajama pants to the length of prize fighters' trunks. He was bobbing and weaving, jabbing and hooking in a swirl of yellow dust motes. "Can't you idiots understand? I don't care. I want my father to see me like this." "All right, Henry. Easy now," an orderly was saying, coming up from behind to put a hand on his shoulder. But the shadow boxer spun and faced him with both fists cocked. "Don't call me Henry, you dumb black bastard. Call me Doctor, and I'll break every fucking bone in your—" "You ain't gonna break nothing, Doctor," a second orderly said, and the two of them held his arms. Both orderlies were bigger than he. They had no trouble turning him around and leading him down the corridor. He didn't struggle in their grip, but his shouting rose until he sounded on the verge of tears. "God damn it! If I want my father to see me like this, it's none of your dumb, black, ignorant motherfucking— Your father didn't get to see you no way, Doctor. Come along easy now. Unless you want Roscoe to shoot you out." Yeah, shoot me out. That's all you know. Big deal. You poor dumb— What do? Go home and tell your wives, "Hey, baby, I got me a doctor today. Got me a real white doctor right in the ass. Well, don't forget I'm naming both of you, and your little buddy Roscoe, too. Tried to send me up to Wingdale. I'm filing a malpractice suit against this hospital. When the facts are out, you'll all be—" He was out of sight now, and out of earshot because of the laughter and jeers and catcalls that broke in his wake. Another Negro in jeans was hurrying down the corridor with a hypodermic syringe. He stopped and squinted at it under a light, holding it high while he thumbed the plunger just enough to make a drop of liquid appear on the point of the needle. Then he went on toward the shouting man. "Go get him, Roscoe," somebody called. "Fix him up good." And there was more laughter as the columns began to move again. Wilder felt a light nudge at his elbow and thought he heard a voice say, "Want to kiss me?" "What?" A remarkably handsome Negro boy was smiling there, wearing a turban made of his pajama top, gently swiveling his shoulders to display the beauty of his naked torso and holding his half-erect cock in his hand. "Do you want to kiss me?" "No." "Oh, it's all right. It's all right, you can kiss me if you want, but only if you say I love you first." It was time for breakfast. Double doors were opened at one end of the corridor, and both columns became a jostling crowd. "All right, hold it. Hold it now. Two at a time, or ain't nobody gonna get nothing to eat." The sense of entrapment was even worse inside the mess hall. Once you'd been shoved, crouching and sidling down the narrow space between a long table and its high-backed, immovable wooden bench, there was no way out. Wilder sat pressed between a toothless ancient man and a fat boy whose wet mouth hung open as if in pain from the cramp of the table against his belly. Each of them received a plastic bowl of glutinous oatmeal with canned milk and a mug of lukewarm coffee. And Wilder didn't know he was hungry until he dug into the oatmeal with a big tin army surplus spoon. If he could eat, if he could drink this coffee and find a cigarette and a telephone, there might still be a chance of the world coming back to normal. But the old man couldn't lift the shaking spoon to the reach of his gums without spilling it. And the fat boy picked up his bowl in both hands and plunged his face into it, slobbering like a dog as the porridge slid down his chest. Then a shrill voice at one of the other tables rose to panic. "Let me out of here! Let me out of here! Let me out of here!" When the mess hall set him free at last, he found that the men who looked the least insane had begun to congregate at the head of the corridor where there was a little L facing the locked front door. On a high bookkeeper's stool beside the door sat a policeman. Not a uniformed hospital guard, but a real New York City cop, complete with badge and dangling nightstick and holstered pistol. He chewed gum steadily and talked to no one, not even the orderlies. And he wore the kind of sunglasses whose lenses were silver mirrors on the outside. If you tried to look into his eyes, you only saw a double image of your own craning face. Even so, this seemed the best place to be, the place where rational things were most likely to happen. "Hey there, Shorty. How's old Shorty today?" The man who said this wasn't much taller than himself, and he was ugly. A sallow face with close-set eyes and a big humorless smile full of bad teeth. But his pajama pocket bulged with cigarettes. "I seen you when they brought you in last night. Boy, you was high." "I was?" He could remember nothing of last night after the ride in the ambulance with Paul Borg rubbing his back. Yelling and screaming, talking a mile a minute. They shot you out and you still wouldn't shut up. I figured, Jesus, this is some tough customer we got here. This must be some big son of a bitch. Then I seen you was even smaller than me and laugh. I damn near died. "Yeah, well, look, could I have a cigarette?" "I'll save you," the man said, and turned away. "Save me?" "He won't save you," another voice said. "He never saves nobody. He's a prick." The door opened then, letting in a rush of cool air. Not fresh air, but cool and better smelling, if only because it came from some wider, cleaner corridor. And there was a loud, happy chorus of, "Charlie! Hey, Charlie, how are you, Charlie?" He was well over 6 feet tall and built like a heavyweight. A Negro dressed in greens like the others, but dominating all of them. Dominating everyone as he pocketed his keyring and moved slowly into the ward, trundling a medicine cart. "Good morning. Good morning," he said in a deep, rich voice. And even the cop said, "Morning, Charlie," after making sure the door was locked behind him. "Hey, Charlie, can I see you a second?" "Charlie, listen. Remember yesterday I asked you about something?" They swarmed around him, coming from all sides as he wheeled his cart to a stop in the exact middle of the corridor, where he raised his head to address them all. "Nourishment, gentlemen," he called out to one end, and "Nourishment, gentlemen," to the other. The trays of the medicine cart held many shot glasses filled with what looked like bourbon whiskey or maple syrup. It was neither, though it tasted a little like both. "You bring my paper, Charlie?" said a man with a dirty bundle of newspapers under his arm. "Oh, now, Mr. Schultz, you have plenty of papers. Use up the papers you have, then maybe I'll bring you a new one." And he turned to one of the orderlies. "How many admissions last night?" 8. We got 117 on the ward now." Charlie winced and shook his big head. "It's too many. And there will be more coming in today, more tomorrow, more Monday. We don't have the facilities for that many." With a jangle of his keyring, he opened a door marked "Keep Out," briefly revealing what looked like a snug little den. A table and chairs, shelves with cups and a hot plate and coffee makings, and came out with 2 packs of Pall Malls in his hand. "All right, one at a time, gentlemen," he said to the eager crowd that pressed around him. "Form a line to the right, please. One at a time and only one apiece. Not you, Mr. Jefferson. You've got a pack in your pocket. You know the rules. These are ward cigarettes." Everything was slightly improved with Charlie's arrival. With the nourishment and the ward cigarettes, the lights were less glaring and the shadows less dark. And there were new discoveries to be made. A long wooden bench against one wall, other places to sit in a recess between sections of folded-up bunks, and even a place to lie down. 4 dirty mattresses on the floor of an alcove at the far end, well away from the mainstream of walkers. But the padded cells were still there. 6 of them, and one now contained the twisted figure of the man who'd shadow boxed and screamed before breakfast. He lay with his mouth still open in the shape of outrage, as if ready to scream again in his drugged sleep, and his dark hair glistened with sweat. Who shot Dr. Spivak out? Charlie's heavy voice inquired. Roscoe, Charlie. He was acting up real bad. What happened to his pants? Tore him off himself, trying to make like a fighter. Then he started yelling about his malpractice suit and all that. Wasn't no other way to handle it. I don't understand that. I thought he was coming along very well. He has his good days and bad days, Charlie. And Charlie got out his keys again. Well, the least we can do is open the door. I don't want him waking up with that door locked. Get him a new set of pajamas, too. Okay, Charlie. Charlie, you're a prince, said a fragile, palsied man of 70 or more. A prince among men. I swear to Jesus, you're a saint, Charlie. Well, Mr. Foley, I thank you for the compliment, but I've already given out the cigarettes, and I happen to know you received one because you tried to take two. Mother of God, how can you think of cigarettes? It's spiritual help I need, Charlie. Spiritual help. I'm not the man to see about that. Why don't you go sit down a while? I have other people to attend to. You, sir. Are you one of the new men? What's your name? Wilder. John Wilder. Did you take your nourishment, Mr. Wilder? Yeah, nourishment, said the old man. You know what it is? It's formaldehyde. That's enough, Mr. Foley. You go along now. Then he said, It's peraldehyde, Mr. Wilder. You get it 3 times a day. It's very good for you. Settles your nerves. I see. Are you the chief orderly or what? I'm a male nurse. There's always a nurse on duty here. My shift's 8 to 5. Oh, well, look, it's very important that I get to a phone as soon as Oh no, Mr. Wilder, you won't be making any phone calls here. Well, how soon? When can I see a doctor? That was when he learned it would be Tuesday before the psychiatrist came back, that it might well be Thursday before they could interview him, and that the length of his stay thereafter would depend on their decision. So meanwhile, Charlie said, I'd suggest you try and make yourself comfortable. He lumbered away, trailing other supplicants in his wake, and Wilder stood watching him go for what seemed an intolerably long time. Comfortable, he said. And then suddenly he was padding after him, running, stepping in slime again, and surprised by the shrillness of his own voice. Comfortable? In this fucking place? Are you out of your fucking mind? Charlie turned back, looming over the chattering men with one long forefinger raised in admonition. Mr. Wilder, I'm telling you now to keep your voice down and keep your temper under control. I don't want to have to tell you again. Yellow and green, and brown and black. Black and brown and green and yellow. The only way to shut out the sounds and the smells of this place was to concentrate on the colors and to walk. Up past the latrine to where the cops sat. Turn. Back past the mess hall to the other end. Turn. A small man could move unnoticed in a crowd like this if he kept his mouth shut and his eyes front and his arms close to avoid touching anyone. He could breathe at measured intervals and keep his own counsel. He could even burst into tears if he did so quietly. Nobody would notice. Instead of crying, he sat down in the only vacant place on one of the corridor benches, and a brown hand slid onto his thigh. It's all right. Huh? It's all right. You can kiss me if you want, but only if you say I love you first. He was up and walking again, and he'd made 3 circuits of the ward when he found an empty mattress in the alcove at the far end. Sitting was better than walking, and lying down was better still, though it sank him deeper into the smells of sweat and feet. He squirmed and sprawled face down in total collapse. The hell with everything. And he even slept for a while, or thought he was asleep, until his eyes came open and saw that the men who lay very close on either side of him were masturbating. But after lunch there was another call of nourishment, gentlemen, and another round of ward cigarettes, and he found himself walking with Dr. Spivak. He didn't recognize him at first because he wore fresh pajamas and had combed his hair and his face was free of hysteria. It was a tightly clenched, sardonic face. You come in last night? Yes. Half these poor bastards don't even know where they are. You know where you are? Bellevue. Gotta be more specific than that, buddy. Bellevue Hospital is a great public medical institution. It's okay, the psycho ward. And you honestly think that there's only one? My God, man, there's an entire psychiatric wing in Bellevue. 7 floors, each one worse than the one beneath, and this is the top. The worst. This is the men's violence ward. Are you blind? Can't you see these clowns in straitjackets? Can't you see that cop? There's got to be a cop on duty here because some of us inmates are police cases, criminals. Nobody knows who. I don't even think the orderlies know. I don't even think Charlie knows. He had been walking briskly, making Wilder stumble and hurry to keep up with him. But now he stopped short, grabbed Wilder's arm, and spun him around to face a stiff, jabbing index finger. How about you, huh? You a police case? No. How about letting go of my arm? Spivak laughed and punched him on the shoulder. It seemed to be meant as a punch of camaraderie, but it hurt. Hell, I'm only kidding. I knew you were okay from your face. Know how you look? Like some little kid's lost his mother in a department store. What's your name? And for at least an hour, Dr. Spivak talked, steering Wilder through the crowds on either side of the corridor, pausing only to interrupt himself with little advisory asides. Don't ever take a flop in there unless you really have to, he said of the alcove with the mattresses. That's jerk-off city. And most of his talk was autobiography. He came from what he called a medical family. All his male forebears had been distinguished doctors in Germany until his father fled with his own family to this country in the 30s. His oldest brother was Tops, a first-rate heart man at Cornell Medical Center, and the second was doing all right too, considering he'd never been the brightest guy in the world. He was a radiologist up at Mount Sinai. You know, he's dumb, but dumb in a way that doesn't show. And he's married to the most glorious piece of ass you ever saw. This big blonde Wisconsin girl with legs that defy description. Then came his sister, who had married a psychiatrist and wasn't that the goddamnedest thing. His own sister, for Christ's sake, actually married to one of those Sigmund Freud freaks. And then came the youngest and the favorite, himself. I had my share of suffering when we first came over. My mother died. They called me the Katzenjammer Kike in junior high, and I got a few bloody noses. But don't worry, I'm not trying to break your heart. I always knew I'd make it, and I did. Never had any sex problems either. Don't worry about that. Never thought I was a fag or anything. Lost my cherry at 15 on the bench at Far Rockaway, and I've been wallowing in pussy ever since. Wallowing in it. You married, Wilder? Yes. Well, maybe that takes care of it for some guys, but I'll be a son of a bitch if any broad's gonna hook me till I'm ready. What kind of work did you do? Sales? Yeah? That's funny. You look smarter than that. I always thought salesmen were slopeheads. What do you sell? Space? The doctor reeled away in astonishment. Christ, isn't anything free anymore? You sell space? Which kind? Inner space or outer space? Huh? I think you know what I mean, Wilder said. Advertising space for a magazine. Oh, yeah, I get it. Advertising space. What magazine? The American Scientist? No kidding. Well, that's impressive. They run some pretty abstruse, sophisticated material. If you understand that stuff, you must be fairly... I don't understand it. I just sell it. How can you sell something you don't understand? Isn't that sort of what psychiatrists do? And that earned him another of Spivak's painful punches and a bray of laughter. You're okay, Wilder, he said. Anyway, I always knew I'd make it, and I did. Straight A's all through college and med school. Did my internship at Johns Hopkins and came here as a resident 2 years ago. Internal medicine. Thought it was an honor to work in Bellevue Hospital. Family did too, and I was damned good. That's not bragging. I happen to be an excellent physician, that's all. Then wham! The old administrative double-cross, and look where the hell I wind up. Talk about irony, huh? Wilder wanted to hear more about the old administrative double-cross, but thought better of asking. And when Spivak began talking again, he had changed the subject. Speaking of fags, he said, you notice how this ward's crawling with them? Fags, junkies, fall-down drunks. Another thing, you notice all this save me talk? Save me, buddy, and all that? It's supposed to be about cigarettes. They want you to save them, the butt, when you're done, but it's really kind of a half-assed prayer. You hear guys say it that don't even smoke. They want to be saved. Find a lot of religious nuts in here. There's one guy thinks he's the second coming of Christ. Probably more than one. It's a common psychotic delusion, but this guy's a riot. Keeps to himself most of the time, then once in a while he puts on a show. Stick around. You'll see him. Hey, and another thing. You notice how they only hire spades here? You know why? No. Why? Why do you think? Because they're so gentle and so kind? Yeah, they've got a natural sense of rhythm, too. They're scared of ghosts, and they're just plain crazy about watermelon. What the hell, were you born yesterday? It's because no white man work here for the kind of money they get. You know what kind of money they get? Even Charlie there? Huh? Excuse me, Mr. Wilder, Charlie said, blocking their path. Those pajamas of yours don't fit very well, do they? No, they don't. Sometimes the night people are careless. We have small, medium, and large. A man of your size needs small. I'll see about it. Yeah, you do that, Charlie, Spivak said. And while you're at it, why don't you see about your buddy Roscoe? I want that little bastard put on a report. Is that clear? If he shoots me out one more time, I'll have his nurse's license. Is that clear? All right, try to keep your voice down, Doctor. Charlie's the only halfway decent one they've got, Spivak said when they were walking again. Know something? This fucking place was built in the 19th century and it hasn't changed a bit. Look at that. He pointed to a bench. And you seen the benches in this mess hall? Antiques. Get some faggot antique dealer up here and he'd pay $1,000 a piece for him. Listen, little piece of advice. Watch out for Roscoe. First morning I was in here, he let me sit in my own urine for half an hour. Or an hour and a half. And mind you, this was after I'd asked him for a urinal 7 times. Bastard kept telling me to go to the latrine. Why didn't you go? Spivak thrust his own head with the heel of his hand in a spasm of exasperation. You're missing the point, Wilder. The point is, when a patient asks a nurse for a urinal, he's supposed to get it. Christ, I thought you showed a glimmer of intelligence. But you're just as fucking dumb as all the other fucking... Look, get lost for a while, okay? My father and my sister are coming to see me tomorrow, and I happen to have a few things on my mind. So he was alone again. But it wasn't long before he had his small pajamas, which were heartening. Then he joined a group of huddled in one of the padded cells whose door had been propped open. The man with the newspapers was there. He had spread part of his collection on the floor for study, and among the others were 2 young boys, white and Negro, who sat deep in conversation against the rear wall. So he was all fooling around this vacant lot up behind the Briar's ice cream sign, see, the white boy was saying, and see, I should have gone home when the other kids did. That's where I made my mistake. Anyways, it was getting dark, and me and this Kovarsky was just kind of sitting there talking and smoking cigarettes behind this sign, and then he... Hold on a second, Ralph, you're going too fast. Who's this Kovarsky? I just told you. He's this big-shot kid in the neighborhood out home. All the kids are scared of him. I mean, he's, real big, and he talks tough, and he's got a record. Breaking and entering. He's 19. Anyways, he says for me to stick around after the other kids go home, and I says, okay. I mean, I know it was dumb, but I guess I was kind of flattered, right? The Negro boy said. Sure, I can see that. So then what? So then he starts giving me cigarettes and telling dirty stuff about girls. Telling the names of all the girls in the senior class he's had intercourse with, and like that, Yeah, shit, I know these kind of guys. How old are you, Ralph? 15? I mean, I'm 15 now. I was 14 then. So anyways, all of a sudden, he kind of moves in close and opens up his pants and tells me to, go down on him, blow him. Jesus. So I tell him no, and I get up quick and start to run around the sign, and he makes a grab for me and says he's going to break my arm. That don't scare me. I know he can't do nothing like that on account of his record. But then he says, okay, kid, you got a choice. Be nice to me, and I won't tell nobody nothing. Run on home, and I swear to God, you're never going to hear the end of this. Oh, Jesus, the Negro boy said. So I go home, and the next day at school, all the kids start in on me. Hey, Ralph, what's it taste like? That kind of stuff. Dirty stuff. Or they grab the front of their pants and say, want to go up behind the Briar's ice cream shop sign, Ralph? And then around the candy store, they start calling me Hot Lips Volpe. That's my last name, Volpe. Even the big kids, juniors and seniors, even the girls. But see, what he did was, this Kowarski, he told everybody it was me wanted to suck him off. The other boy looked puzzled. How come you didn't tell him the truth? I did. I told him, and everybody just laughed. Because it was just my word against his, see? And this Kowarski is such a big shot, who's going to believe me? Man, that's a tough story. And then my father hears about it. Your father? Your father didn't believe you either? Well, see, he got it from the other kids' fathers. He says, Ralph, I want you to tell me exactly what happened up behind that sign. So I tell him, and he says, that's not the way I heard it. And I says, I swear. He just sits there and looks at me like I'm some kind of, I don't know. And ever since then, Ralph couldn't finish. He turned his face against the wall mat, wholly expressionless, and began fingering his pimples. All his fingernails had been bitten to the quick. Man, said the Negro boy, I mean, that is one tough story. Hey, listen, though, I got an idea. Let's play a game. Let's play pictures. You know how to play pictures, Ralph? Ralph didn't answer. How about you, man? What's your name? John. I'm Francis, John. This here's Ralph. You want to play pictures? It's easy. I say something. You all try and tell me what the picture it's in. Here's an example. I say, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. What picture is that? Well, I guess I don't. You don't know? Shit, man, that's Gone with the Wind. Clark Gable says it to Vivian Lee. You want another one? Okay. Here's another one. Wait a minute. Francis screwed up his eyes in concentration. You got another one, Ralph? No. You got one, John? Not yet. Well, wait a minute. We'll think of one. Plenty of good pictures. But his downcast, brooding face had begun to suggest that there wasn't plenty of them at all. Some pictures I don't like, he said. I don't like that psycho, Anthony Perkins. I mean, that's a bad picture, know what I mean? Yeah. Well, let's think. He thought for a while, and then he said, shit, I don't want to play pictures anymore. You like music, John? Sure, what kind of music? Any kind. You like this? He bunched himself into an athletic squat and began slapping his flexed thighs as if they were bongo drums. When the rhythm was established, he threw back his head and closed his eyes as he sang, or rather wailed and howled, in what could have been an ultra-progressive style of jazz or an African tribal chant. Ralph seemed to like it. His own eyes glazed over, and he wagged his head to the drumming. Hey, said the man with the newspapers, take a look at this. He had neatly torn out a sports headline from the New York Post. Can Maris top the Babe? Got that? He said. Well, watch. Wait. Out of his rattled sheath came half a dozen other scraps of newsprint, which he shielded from view. Wait, he muttered over his work, carefully tearing and smoothing and adjusting, and then, look now, he said. Look at here. He had laid out a big photograph of Marilyn Monroe. The headline above it read, Can Paris stop this, babe? And beneath it, in many different typefaces, ran the caption, Tired blood? Talk about summer values. I voices concern as thousands flee city's heat. FBI joins state, local police in massive effort to fly Air France. Well, that's quite something. It's not a very good one. I'll do a better one. Wait. Francis's music had grown louder and seemed to have put him in a trance. The effort of singing had brought up 2 gouts of phlegm from his throat, but he'd caught them both without missing a beat, one on the back of each flying hand. "Mr. Wilder," Charlie called from the corridor. He was holding Spivak close by the upper arm, either in restraint or affection, and Spivak glowered with narrow eyes, breathing so hard through his nose that his head wobbled slightly with each breath. "Mr. Wilder, Dr. Spivak would like you to come join him for supper this evening." "Okay, you can eat with me, Wilder," Spivak said, as they filed into the stifling mess hall. "But no more questions. No more fucking talk. Is that clear?" On Sunday morning, Wilder was shot out. It happened so quickly that he could never afterwards put it straight in his memory. There was no coherent pattern of helplessness and resentment and anger rising to rage. He'd had his breakfast and his nourishment and his ward's cigarette. He was standing alone at one of the gray windows looking out on nothing, and he heard the shouted word "shit, shit," before he recognized his own voice. He stepped back from the window, raised the sole of one dirty foot, and slammed it against the steel mesh grid, denting it. And the sight of that dent was so invigorating that he hauled off and slammed it again and again, making it deeper, while his raw throat burned with a cry of "shit, shit, shit." He was only dimly aware of other voices around him. "Watch it, fella. Easy, easy." And not until 2 orderlies grabbed his arms did he know he was in trouble. "Hey, Charlie!" Somebody yelled, "Charlie!" And there he came, lumbering down the corridor with his face pressed into a frown. He paused under a light to squint at his upraised needle until the drop gleamed on its point. Then the orderlies tore down Wilder's pants, and Charlie sank the shot into one buttock. "I did warn you, Mr. Wilder," he said. "I told you to watch that temper of yours." The door of a padded cell was opened just enough for Wilder to be flung inside. It slammed shut, and he heard the lock click. He couldn't breathe, and it took a great deal of work to pull up his pants and secure them while scrabbling on all fours around the soft floor. Then the drug went to work in on him. Heavy waves of sleep as deep as drowning. And the last thing he knew as he turned and floundered and sank was that nothing in his life had ever been as bad as this. This was the worst. "Wilder? Hey, off your ass, man." It could have been 10 minutes or 10 hours later. "Wilder." What? Get up out of there, man. You got visitors." Visitors. He stumbled up the corridor like a drunk, colliding with other men, reeling against one wall for support and then against the other. Even when he found his balance, he had to stop and run furtive fingers down the fly of his pants to make sure it was closed, while his free hand clawed hair away from his eyes. The mess hall had been transformed into a visitor's room. Tables shoved out of the way, benches hauled around in conversational groupings. And he stood blinking in the doorway for some time before discovering his wife and Paul Borg. He tried not to wobble as he sat down with them and said hello. "Oh, this must be awful for you, John," Janice said, putting her hand on his knee. "This place." She looked troubled and affectionate. She had even worn what she called his favorite dress, a blue and brown print that emphasized her breasts. And for a second or two, he could see the girl who had made all other girls unnecessary long ago. "Yeah, well, how have you been? How's Tommy?" "We're fine, except that we miss you." "What'd you tell him?" "I said you'd been held over by business in Chicago." "Well, but the trouble is you can't possibly say when I'll be back. I won't even see a doctor till Thursday, and God only knows what'll happen after that. Might be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I mean, what are you going to tell him?" "Shh." She squeezed his knee. "Why don't you let me worry about Tommy? He'll be fine, I promise. You just concentrate on getting rested and getting well." "And I can't even call him because there's no phone here. Look, you better call the office Tuesday. Tell George I've got the flu or something." "Oh, of course, dear. That's no problem." Paul Borg had been gazing around at other patients as if trying to assess the degree of insanity in each case. Then he turned the same cool scrutiny on Wilder for an instant before they both lowered their eyes. And that was when Wilder saw a carton of cigarettes on Borg's lap. Jesus, are those for me? Can I have them? One thing I still fail to understand, Borg was saying, is this nuisance about the Labor Day weekend. Yeah, an institution of this size, a public institution, surely it's reasonable to expect at least a partial psychiatric staff to be on duty over the holidays. Yeah, sure is. With a cigarette in his mouth, a pack in his pocket, and a carton under his arm, he was ready to forgive anybody for anything. At the end of the visiting hour, they went out into the pressing, overheated crowd near the front door. Borg shook his hand, and Janice put her arms around him to kiss him goodbye. John, she said, you know what I thought we might do when you do come home? I thought we might drive up to the country with Tommy. He can skip a few days of school and just relax and be together and have a little vacation. Maybe a whole week. How does that sound? Sounds fine. Yeah, that sounds fine. And the door was locked behind them. Hey, save me, buddy, okay? Save me, man. Save me. He was the center of attention, passing out cigarettes until Charlie said, Mr. Wilder, will you come with me, please? And led him to the keep out room. That carton won't last very long if you carry it around, he said. What we generally do when a man gets a carton, we keep it for him in here. I'll write your name on it. And while writing, he said, was that lady your wife, Mr. Wilder? Yes. A very nice-looking lady. Very well-dressed. You have children? Well, that's fine. A son. I have 3 little girls myself, he said when they were back in the corridor. 7, 8, and 9 years old. They're the joy of my life. All right, how'd you like that, Charlie? Spivak demanded. Explain that to me if you're so fucking smart. Explain what, Doctor? What the hell do you think? My father and my sister. I gave them every chance. I waited at that goddamn door for a solid hour and neither one of them showed up. You know what I think? His eyes were as wild as when he'd been shot out for shadowboxing. Charlie laid one hand around his shoulder as if to guide him away for a private talk, but he held his ground. You know what I think? That jerk-off spook of a husband of hers got them both by the short hairs. He's got them both convinced I'm a dangerous lunatic and they've written me off. They're going to let me rot in here. Oh, now I imagine there's any number of reasons why they couldn't make it today, Doctor. One thing, you have to remember your father's getting on in years and it's a long trip for him. All the way down from White Plains. Your sister has her family to look after, and she's probably... Charlie, you're a great big chocolate sweetheart, but you don't know shit about human nature. Even a dumb little asshole like Wilder knows more than you. Give me your pen. I don't believe I'll give you anything, Doctor, until you apologize to Mr. Wilder and to me for your language. Jesus fucking Christ, language, apologize. All right. I apologize. Let's try it this way. Nurse, would you please be so kind as to lend me your invaluable 29-cent ballpoint pen for approximately 12 seconds? He tore a dirty scrap of paper from his pajama pocket, held it flat against the wall, and wrote a set of numerals. Here. Now listen carefully. This is my sister's phone number. When you get off work tonight, I want you to call this number and give her the following message. Tell her... But Charlie was shaking his head. You know I can't do anything like that. Spivak backed away 3 steps and stood there. Legs apart, fists clenched, and eyes blazing. So what the hell can you do? Smile? Preach? Make everybody's ass feel good? What the hell can you do, you big dumb motherfucking... Doctor! Yeah, doctor? Shit. Why don't you just shoot me out and get it over with? I've considered that, Charlie said, but I believe you're playing games with me. You know I don't play games. What's more, you've taken up too much of my time. There are a good many other patients on this ward besides yourself. He turned and walked away into one of the shuffling columns, soon surrounded by other talking, favor-seeking men. Spivak slumped alone against the wall, and that gave Wilder a chance for escape. He ducked quickly into the latrine. He had a comb in his pocket now, another gift from Paul Borg, so he dampened his head and restored it to the carefully casual shape of every day. A clean part on the left, short front hairs combed sideways across the brow, longer side hairs back and down. It was a style he had copied from the actor Alan Ladd after years of experimentation, and it looked all right. He had to admit, studying himself from several angles in the dim white and red fleckered mirror, that this was a sound, manly, reliable face. Troubled, maybe, but not openly neurotic and certainly not mentally ill. It was nothing less than absurd for him to be here, in the men's violence ward, and the absurdity made him toss his head with a wry, amused little smile. "Hey, what the hell are you doing, man?" said a voice behind him. "You trying to look pretty for yourself?" "I mean, it may be understandable in my sister's case," Spivak said, coming up beside him in the supper line. "She lets that slippery bastard fuck her every night. He works the old cock up in there and shoves it around till she screams. And I guess you can't blame her for believing all that Sigmund Freud horse shit he gives her in the daytime. But my father, that's something else. And my brothers. They're intelligent men. They're medical men. They know I was railroaded in here on some half-assed, trumped-up charge of... Never mind. Let's go eat up our goody-good macaroni and cheese." One of the new patients brought in on Monday, or was it Tuesday, was a gray-haired Negro so badly injured around the head and face that blood-stained bandages covered his eyes. They couldn't make a blind man walk, so his bunk stayed down, and he lay on it all day, as the column on that side of the corridor detoured around him. Wilder passed him twice before noticing that his wrists and ankles were secured to the bunk by heavy restraining bands. He writhed constantly, groaning and muttering. Several times he struggled up to a half-sitting position and screamed. "DTs," Spivak explained. "How can you tell?" "Obvious. Anyone with medical training can spot 'em. A lot of drunks in here have 'em all the time. Hear what he was yelling just now, when Charlie went over to him?" "No." Got the elucidations. Got the elucidations. Didn't you hear that? He means hallucinations. Bastard's been soaking up a quart a day for 25 years, and now his brains have turned to shit. You drink, Wilder?" "Some." "How much? 4, 5, 6 drinks a day?" "I don't know. 8, 10, 15, more than that? Huh?" "Look, Spivak, in the first place, I don't think it's any of your fucking... Ooh, boy, talk about hitting a sore spot. So that's your trouble. Well, it figures. You do look like a lush. Funny, I didn't notice before." "Yeah, funny," Wilder said. "Fuck you." And Spivak's reply was to thrust a triumphant middle finger in the air and say, "Fuck you," as he turned and disappeared into the column of walkers. For the rest of that day, Tuesday, they avoided each other. Wilder tried to renew his acquaintance with Ralph and Francis, but Ralph didn't seem to recognize him, and Francis didn't want to play pictures even when Wilder fed him a good one. "Hey, what picture is this? Play it again, Sam." He helped the newspaper man lay out a spread that didn't work at all, and after that he kept to himself, walking the corridor, peering at his double image in the cop's sunglasses, smoking cigarettes and saving people, wondering in a quiet panic if he really might be out of his mind. But sometime during the next afternoon he heard the blind man saying, oh, and found Spivak crouching low over his bunk. "What's the matter, Sambo?" Spivak inquired softly. "You got them old elucidations again? You want a drink?" "Well, I'm afraid that's tough, Sambo, because we don't got no drinks in here." "Oh, no, we don't got nothing in here but formaldehyde and straitjackets and shots in the ass and..." "Why don't you cut that shit out?" Wilder said. Spivak straightened his spine and turned around in a great display of surprise. "Well, I'll be goddamned." His gaze ran from Wilder's eyes to his bare feet and back again. "Look who's preaching at me now. I thought I'd taken just about every kind of holy Joe shit there is from every kind of fool, and now some pipsqueak, some drunken little salesman starts telling me kindness. starts telling me compassion, starts telling me, "You're an arrogant, insolent, overbearing son of a bitch, Spivak. You're a prick." Wilder walked backwards, letting Spivak advance on him, but it wasn't a retreat. He was withdrawing to a wider part of the corridor where the crowd was thin and he could take a stand. "And what do you think you are? Some Boy Scout? Some faggot social worker? Some saint? Christ himself? Huh?" They both stopped, 3 feet apart, glaring fiercely and ready for anything. Neither of them took up a fighting stance. Their hands hung loose, but Wilder squared his shoulders and said, "How'd you like a punch in the mouth, Spivak?" "From you? Funny little alcoholic creep? Shit, I'd wipe up the floor with you in 5 seconds and you know it." "Don't be too fucking sure of that, Spivak. Wanna try it? See what happens?" Then the keep-out door swung open and Charlie was smiling there, happy with welcome. "Gentlemen," he said, "would you care to join me for a cup of coffee?" Going about the cordial business of arranging chairs for them and measuring out instant coffee while the pan of water bubbled on the hot plate, he seemed unaware of their red, hard-breathing faces and trembling limbs. "I generally enjoy a little coffee at this time of day," he said, "and once in a while it's nice to have company. If you don't mind, I think I'll just shut that door. Makes the air a little close in here. But I don't want to give the impression I'm holding open house. Sugar and cream, Mr. Wilder?" "Yes, please. It's only a powdered cream substitute, of course, but it's very tasty. You, doctor?" "No thanks. Black." At first, Charlie did all the talking as they sat and sipped and smoked in this unaccustomed luxury. Wilder kept waiting for his monologue to turn into a lecture. "Now, I don't want to see any more trouble between you two." But it didn't, and soon they were able to relax. They could even exchange bashful, half-smiling glances of complicity, like bad little boys who'd managed to raise hell without getting caught. "Well, I'm certainly glad the holiday's over," Charlie was saying. "These long weekends are always difficult. We get badly overcrowded. We don't have an adequate staff. It's good to have the psychiatrist back." "Oh, now never mind, doctor. I know your opinion of psychiatrists. We needn't go into that. All I mean is, from my point of view, it's good to have them back because they make decisions. Some of the men here have to go home to their families, right? Some have to be sent to alcoholic or narcotic facilities. Some have to be sent up to Wingdale or Rockland or wherever, and some, well, it's no secret, some have to go to criminal court. And I mean, those decisions have to be made, right?" Spivak frowned over the careful stubbing out of his cigarette. "Charlie," he said, "will you tell me the truth? I'll do my best. Who was it? Which of these big decision makers of yours? Exactly which one of them told you I was a paranoid schizophrenic?" And Charlie leaned back for a delighted peal of laughter, placing one great shoe on the edge of the table. "Oh, doctor, you tickle me. It wasn't any of them. It was you yourself. You came out of an interview, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago, and you said, 'Better watch out for me, Charlie. I'm a paranoid schizophrenic.' It was you yourself told me." But Spivak wasn't not amused. When Charlie's laughter dwindled, he put both feet on the floor and leaned earnestly forward. "I do know one thing, though, doctor. Mind you, this isn't criticism. But I imagine every time you see those psychiatrists, you go in with a negative attitude. I imagine you tell them about filing your malpractice suit and so on. And of course that's understandable. You're a physician too, and you've been placed in a difficult situation here. All I mean to suggest is this. Why don't you surprise them next time? Walk in there and answer their questions, make a good appearance, show a little sense of humor. Let them see the kind of rational, agreeable man you are most of the time. The kind of man you are with me or with Wilder here." Yeah, okay," Spivak said. "I'll turn on the old charm. Hey, here, I forgot to give you your pen back." He unclipped it from his pajama pocket and slid it across the table. "Don't suppose you got an envelope, do you, Charlie?" "An envelope? No. Doesn't matter. Even if I had an envelope, I'd still need a stamp. Thing is, I wrote a letter to my sister. Want to read it?" "Oh, I'd rather not. Doctor, if you don't mind, I don't really enjoy reading other people's personal..." The door shuddered with a pounding and a voice called, "Charlie, there's a turd on the floor. Some son of a bitch dropped a turd on the floor." "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said as he escorted them quickly back into the corridor. "I have to lock up here. It's been a pleasure." Would there now be a resumption of their fight? Evidently not. Spivak walked moodily but not angrily, and soon he made shy, tentative efforts at conversation. "There goes a Wayndale man," he said as they passed a muscular, dull-eyed Puerto Rican wearing work clothes. High-top shoes, denim shirt, green twill pants with wide old-fashioned suspenders. When they dress him up that way, it's Wayndale every time, and oh Jesus, look at that. A very old white man stood crying like an infant. "Wah, wah, wah," as an orderly approached him with a straitjacket. He twisted away and tried feebly to escape. In the tussle, his pajama pants fell and revealed genitals so shriveled and small that they might have been an infant's too, and he clutched them either in shame or anxiety. "Hey there, sex spot," Spivak said in passing. "Save me, buddy," the shuffling men were saying of their cigarettes. "Save me." Yeah, we'll save you. Hey, look, Wilder, there isn't a soul in Jerkoff City. Want to sit down?" And they sank onto the stained mattresses. "Want to read my letter? I mean, I worked like a bastard on it. Seems like somebody ought to read the damned thing." "Okay, sure." He accepted the smudged, much-folded sheet of paper and opened it. "Dear Sis, dear Miss Priss, if you are languorously glancing through the New Yorker and sipping an ever so extra dry martini when you receive this letter, or if you are changing from a terribly sweet little cocktail dress into something svelte and provocative for evening, or if you are dabbing a delightfully subtle Parisian scent at your throat in preparation for a prolonged and exquisite dalliance with your husband tonight, then don't bother to read it. Drop it among the crushed gardenias and the empty Lieb from milk bottles and the Tiffany invitations to parties you've chosen not to attend. If, however, this letter finds you on your knees in your dungarees, scrubbing the kitchen floor, or scouring a pot so badly encrusted with last Saturday's beef bourguignon that your fingers bleed into the Brillo, or better still, sitting and grunting and raising a stink on what I believe your husband calls the John, then read the hell out of it, baby. This is important. This is reality. 1. Call Dad. 2. Call Eric and Mark. 3. Tell your husband he is a simpering, pretentious little fool. 4. Get me out of here. Henry. So what do you think? He asked. Well, it's pretty funny, but the general tone does seem a little hostile, right? That's every psychiatrist's favorite word. I wasn't going to say that. I just mean it's a little on the self-defeating side. Doesn't seem very likely to accomplish its purpose. Spivak sighed and stuffed it back into his pajamas. I guess you're right. Purely an academic question anyway. Haven't got an envelope, haven't got a stamp. Wilder's name was called on Thursday morning. He stood by the cop at the door, combing and recombing his hair while Spivak gave him last-minute counsel. It's an inquisition. They ask you questions, loaded questions, the kind that never stand up in a court of law. And when you answer, they don't listen to you. They listen at you. They let everything you say slide past and hang in the air while they study it. Because it's not the substance they care about, it's the style. You can almost see them thinking, interesting. Why'd he make that slip? Why that particular choice of words? Oh, and they watch you like hawks, too. Not just your face. It's very important to keep a straight face and look them in the eyes. But everything. Squirm around in your chair, cross your legs, put your hand up to your head or anything like that, and you're dead. Okay, Wilder, an orderly said, let's go. There may have been less than a dozen white-coated men in the interview room, but there seemed to be twice that many. They sat row on row in chairs with writing panel armrests like students, and Wilder faced alone in an ordinary chair with his sweating hands on his thighs, as if he were their teacher. Nobody smiled. A bald, heavy man in the front row cleared his throat and said, Well, what seems to be the trouble? It probably lasted a quarter of an hour. First, he did his best to tell them about the business trip to Chicago, about the week of insomnia and heavy drinking, about Paul Borg and St. Vincent's and the poorly remembered events that had brought him here. Then came the questions. Had Wilder ever been in a mental hospital before? Had he ever been under psychiatric care? Had he ever sought treatment for alcoholism? Had his drinking ever gotten him into trouble with an employer, with his family, with the police? No, he kept saying. No, no, no. And through it all, he held his face straight, sat still, and didn't gesticulate. But after the questions, they stared in silence. They seemed to expect him to make a summing up in his own self-defense. And that was when everything went to hell. One hand leapt to his wet brow and clung there. Look, he said, listen, if I know I say I'm not crazy, it'll probably just convince you I am. But even so, that's my position. The hand fell back to his thigh, but he knew he was squirming because he heard his chair creak. I don't think I'm crazy or mentally ill or emotionally disturbed or whatever the hell, whatever you people call it. His mouth was so dry he could feel every movement of tongue and teeth and lips in their laborious effort to form speech. I know I was behaving erratically, or irrationally last Friday. But that was last Friday. After the first couple of nights' sleep, the first few doses of formaldehyde, paraldehyde, I think I was all right again, and I'm all right now. So the point is, Christ's sake, is anybody listening? The spastic hand flew to his head again, messing up his hair, and his eyes closed to shut out their faces. What makes you think nobody's listening? Because I've been locked up in because this place is enough to drive anybody out of their... I don't know. He opened his eyes, but nothing could be done about his hand. Look, listen, I don't think I belong here anymore, and I think I ought to be discharged. That's all I gotta say. He was reminded again of the classroom, this time of one whose students are embarrassed because their teacher has made a fool of himself. So his face twitched into an apologetic little grimace, and he said what teachers often say at such moments. Are there any questions? Okay, Wilder, said the orderly, and he was escorted back and locked into the ward, where he wanted to smash his fist against the wall or scream or kick a window again with his filthy foot. Instead, he walked and smoked, promising to save people. How'd it go? Spivak inquired. Shit, I don't know. Slimy bunch of bastards, aren't they? Make your flesh crawl. And when you think of the power those fish-eyed fuckers have over a man's life, talk about your FBI. Talk about your CIA. Talk about your Nazi secret police. But an hour later, Charlie beckoned him aside for a hushed private talk near the keep out door. You did very well in there, Mr. Wilder. I what? I did? How do you know? Well, now, never mind. I just happen to know you gave a good account of yourself. Matter of fact, I understand they'll be taking you down to rehabilitation after lunch. It's very nice there. Very clean. They seldom keep a man more than 24 hours. Give you a little counseling, finish up your paperwork, get your clothes, and you're free to go. But look, it's a busy day and I might not see you again, so I'll just say goodbye and wish you well. He held out a big hand to shake, and another thing. I think it's very nice the way you've been so friendly with Dr. Spivak, talking with him, taking your meals with him. Dr. Spivak didn't really have any friends here till you came. He's a fine man, as you know, only trouble is he's a little disturbed. Well, good luck, sir. Thanks. Thanks, Charlie. And he watched him move away to bear down on the beautiful boy in the turban. Gail? Now, Gail, how many times have I told you to take that pajama top off your head and put your penis back in your pants where it belongs? Nobody wants to look at that thing. They called 6 or 8 men to stand by the front door after lunch, and Wilder was among them. Well, look at you, Spivak said, advancing on him. What'd you do in there anyway? Bribe them? Blackmail them? Crawl around and kiss their asses? Hey, wait a second. Got something for you. And he probed in his pajama pocket to watch Charlie's pen to which Charlie's pen was clipped. What's this? Another letter? No, shitface. My address and phone number. If I ever do get out of here, I might buy you a drink sometime. Well, that's very sure, thanks. So here's the pen. Want to give me yours? And Wilder did so. I'll look forward to it, Spivak, he said. Yeah, well, don't hold your breath. I may forget your fucking existence in an hour and a half. Anyway, keep a tight asshole, Wilder. I'll try. You too. The door opened, not to let the men out, but to admit an elderly female nurse, trailed by a dozen very young girls in fresh blue and white striped smocks and white stockings. My God, Spivak said, student nurses. Beautiful little student nurses on a training tour. He stepped back into the corridor and stood with his arms flung wide like a master of ceremonies. Girls, I'm delighted to see you. It's nonsense for them to send you up here because once you graduate, you'll never get near this place. But even so, you might learn something. Oh, it's all right, nurse, he said to their leader, who seemed to have been stricken dumb. I'm a staff physician. I can handle this. Girls, what we have here is a relic of the 19th century. This isn't a psychiatric ward, you see. It's a madhouse. Some of the girls looked bewildered, and a few looked scared, but most had begun to giggle behind their hands to show they found Spivak cute. Officer, the nurse was saying to the cop, who's the charge nurse on this ward? His name's Charlie, ma'am. I can't leave the door, but I'll send somebody to get him. Just a second. Hey, we have psychopathic criminals here, girls, and we have men in advanced stages of madness caused by a venereal disease and alcohol and drugs. And we have at least one second coming of Christ. Then we have men who don't belong here at all. Take my own case. I'm what you might call a political prisoner. Hospital politics, that is. Medical politics. I don't suppose they teach you girls about medical politics, but I really think they should because, believe me, it's a very real, very treacherous doctor. Charlie came loping up the corridor and a swarm of laughing men. Doctor, I want you to leave those girls alone. The door opened again to let Wilder's group out, and then it was locked behind them. Rehabilitation was very nice and clean indeed. Real beds, chrome and leatherette armchairs, good showers with soap and a kind of shampoo guaranteed to remove lice. The talk was quiet and most of it courteous. Nobody wanted to make trouble. Counseling the next day meant being taken into a room full of cluttered typewriter desks. It might have been a state unemployment office, and sitting down beside a pale man who looked like an underpaid clerk but was said to be a psychiatric social worker. And you'll be seeking psychotherapy after your release, right? Well, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. The interviewer stopped typing, closed his eyes, and ran pale fingers over his face. You know something? I don't understand some of you people. You're a mature, well-employed man with family responsibilities. You spend a week as an involuntary patient in the tightest lockup in the city, and you haven't really thought about it? Okay, I will then. You damn sure better, mister. Now, can you afford private care, or do you want to apply for outpatient treatment here? Private care. What about your drinking? You gonna quit? Frankly, I think that's my own... Well, look, if you're filling out a form here, just write yes. That'll take care of it. Oh, you are a little wise guy, aren't you? I don't know. Some of you people... He finished typing, ripped the forms from the machine, and tore out the carbon paper. Then he stapled them, banged them angrily in several places with a rubber stamp, and the business seemed concluded. Can I get my clothes now? You're kidding. You've got to be kidding. You think the city of New York's just going to let you walk out of here after the way you came in? You can be discharged, he said, only in the custody of Mr. Paul R. Borg. Only after he has personally met and talked with me, and only if he agrees to sign these papers. He reached for his phone. Now you go back inside and wait. I'm tired of your face. It didn't take very long. Paul Borg came walking into rehabilitation with an anxious smile, carrying a mimeographed slip. He had signed the discharge papers, he said. This one was This was the one for the clothes. It says room 3F. You know where that is? They found it only after walking down wrong corridors, taking wrong elevators, and asking directions of people who didn't speak English. And when Wilder was dressed, an incredible pleasure, his own clothes and shoes, his own wristwatch and wallet full of money, he said, "Listen, Paul, something I've got to do. Gotta find the canteen or the gift shop or whatever they call it." "Why?" "Never mind. Come on. Must be on the ground floor." It was, and Wilder bought a carton of Pall Malls. With his own pen he wrote, "For Charlie with many thanks," and signed his name. "Now," he said, "where's the psycho elevator?" "John, what is this?" "Never mind, it's important." "Men's violence ward?" said the puzzled elevator man. "Ain't no ward by that name." "Well, that may not be the official name," Wilder said, "but it's the men's ward on the 7th floor. Can't take you up there anyway. Ain't no visiting hour today." "I'm not a visitor. Well, look, just take this up to the ward. Give it to the cop at the door and tell him it's for Charlie. Will you do that?" "Oh, sure, okay." And the door slid shut. "Son of a bitch will keep him for himself," Wilder said, "or else he'll give him to the cop and the cop will keep him. I should have insisted on going up. I should have demanded to go up." "John, it doesn't matter. Can't you see it doesn't matter?" "It does matter. Some things matter, that's all." But at last they found their way through corridors and waiting rooms and doors into the abrupt, fresh air of First Avenue. And Wilder said, "Wow." Then he said, "My God." It was mid-afternoon on a fine September day, and nothing had ever smelled so sweet. Tall buildings rose in a deep blue sky, and pigeons wheeled and sailed among them. Clean cars and taxicabs sped uptown, bearing sane, unfettered people to the sane, unfettered business of the world. "I'm parked right around the corner," Borg said as they walked. Have you home in no time at all." "John, what's the trouble now?" He had stopped to read a torn scrap of paper from his pocket. Henry J. Spivak, M.D., with an address and phone number lettered underneath. "Nothing," he said, and let it flutter from his hand to the dirty street. "It's nothing. It doesn't matter."